Yesterday against the Chicago Bulls, it was a tale of two halves for the Memphis Grizzlies because in the first half, they looked like a team poised to make an NBA Finals run potentially. And then in the second half, they look like a team that has a lot to work on over the next week. So, what's the truth? Where are the Grizzlies right now after a 23-point blown lead in Chicago? And the answer, we're going to have that for you coming up right here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stay locked in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host today, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal, Damichael Cole, right here in Memphis, Tennessee. First and foremost, want to appreciate you and thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with us. And we made it, y'all. We've made it to the final week of the regular season, so a lot to talk about, a lot of things, to get the little kinks here done before we get to the postseason, and it's party time. It's party time. But with the Grizzlies here, they got a lot of kinks to figure out. There's a lot of things with the Grizzlies where I feel like overall they're in a good position, but they're not in a great position going into the postseason. But you got a week to figure some of those things out because none of the things that I think they have to figure out are long-term issues potentially. But you only got a week. I mean, that's not a lot of time. Going back to yesterday's game, as I stated earlier, the Grizzlies lost by 20. They led by 23 points and lost by 21. A completely drastic turnaround. And before we talk about that turnaround, I want to let you know that this episode today is brought to you by Prize Picks. See, the thing about Prize Picks is 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with the promo code Locked On if you're a first-time listener. Remember, first-time users, you can receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. All you have to do is go to prizepicks.com and use the promo code Locked On. So the Grizzlies, first game, on this one-game road trip, you go out to Chicago, and they looked good in that first half. 13 made three-pointers, and I think it's always better when it wasn't just Luke Kennard, on one of his hot streaks, or Desmond Bane on one of his shot streaks, or Tyus Jones on one of his hot streaks. Dez was making them. Luke was making them. Jaren Jackson Jr. chipped in. Dylan Brooks was phenomenal. I think he made 3 of his first 4 three-pointers. Everyone was chipping in, and it was like, man, if this is what teams are going to have to guard in the postseason, good luck. The Grizzlies raced out to a 23-point lead, I think, midway through the second quarter, and then everything went crashing down. As Taylor Jenkins said, the Grizzlies played one of their worst third quarters of the season, one of the worst quarters of the season. And it's kind of, it's kind of strange that it happened in the third quarter. That's the quarter, if you've been listening to us here, or if you read my work at the Commercial Appeal, I've kind of talked about how that third quarter has been where the Grizzlies make their adjustments at the halftime and they break teams down. This time it was the other way around. So we can break down how the Grizzlies got the lead, how they lost it, and just what's the overall theme here. Some people say, it's just one game, throw it out the window. Some people will say you shouldn't have these type of performances 1 week before the playoffs if you want to go into the playoffs playing your best basketball. Well, let's start off with how the Grizzlies got the lead. It was a terrific first half of basketball. It wasn't the fact that the Grizzlies were just knocking down shots. It was how they got those shots. It was how, easy those shots came into flow. And that's where I say the Grizzlies can kind of separate themselves if they can consistently play this brand of basketball going into the postseason. The Grizzlies had 19 assists in the first half. 19 assists. Yeah, I've said 30 assists in a game is usually kind of the barometer, right? For if a team is having, an amazing day passing the ball. You want to get to 30 assists. 30 assists is the numbers. But the Grizzlies had 19. Basically, we're on pace for 38 assists in this game. So I think, that stood out to me as personally the Grizzlies were moving the basketball. I saw the Grizzlies coaches talk about it, at halftime, how when this team moves the basketball like this, they're pretty hard to beat. I'll give you some numbers here. When the Grizzlies totaled 30 assists in the NBA, they've been one of the hardest teams to beat in the association. I believe quite simply looking at the numbers here. They had 37 assists against. They had 30. They had 37 assists against the Toronto Raptors. That's the highest. You have to go down all the way to a 32 assist game against the LA Clippers. And outside it, before that game, the Grizzlies have had, I believe, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 wins. 14 wins with games over 30 assists, 14-1. It's simple. You get 30 assists, you win games. So started off with 19 assists. Tyus Jones, Ja Morant, all these guys getting involved. Ja Morant finished the game with a triple-double. So the ball movement was phenomenal in the first half. And then the second half happened. The coaches said, hey, we got to keep the ball moving. It stopped. And not only did the ball movement stop, the playing style that the Grizzlies play, they kept playing the same playing style in a way. But there's a good and a bad side. I kind of tweeted a reference to it, but I'm going to break down what I'm saying here. So the Grizzlies have one of the fastest paces in the NBA. It's good, right? It's good when you see Ja Morant getting downhill with 20 seconds on the shot clock, dunking on people, and Desmond Bane, as a lot of people like to call him, downhill Dez, getting downhill, with that shoulder, moving guys out of the way and making layups, and Dylan Brooks running the floor, and Jaren Jackson Jr. running the floor, and the list goes on. It's good when it's fun, and the Grizzlies are putting up 35, 40-point quarters and scoring 20 points in the paint, 10 transition points in a quarter. But there's a side where it can backfire. And I don't know if the Grizzlies have really figured out how to find that balance. In this game against the Bulls, the Grizzlies were up 23 points, 5 minutes left in the second quarter. Chicago took the lead with just a couple minutes left in the third quarter. Never relinquished the lead after that. For a team to overcome a 23-point deficit pretty much in a quarter's time of play, the Grizzlies committed turnovers. But even when the Grizzlies weren't scoring, it was there were a couple possessions where Desmond Bane got the rebound and he just went coast to coast and he'd miss a layup. And if you got to put yourself in the opposing shoes to really figure out what I'm saying here. If you're the other team, if you're trying to make that comeback, we've seen the Grizzlies do it, right? Grizzlies came back from 29 points against the San Antonio Spurs just a couple weeks ago. When you're the other team in that situation, the team trying to make the comeback, anytime you see that team in the lead taking quick shots, you're like, oh, yes. Ooh, thank you. Thank you, because you're bailing me out, especially when you miss. Even if you make it, okay, cool, let's go. We got plenty of time. When you derail a team is when you milk the clock. And it's 6 seconds on the clock, and then you just go into your move and you nail it. It's like, man, they knocked all the time off the clock and they got the basket. Even if you miss, you knocked a lot of time off the clock. Now, I'm not saying the Grizzlies need to play keep away and all that. Don't get it twisted. I applaud the Grizzlies for staying aggressive, for keeping, their foot on the gas pedal, even while being up 23 points. But it was clear as day. The things got out of control. Patrick Beverley, Alex Caruso, the Bulls have a terrific defensive backcourt. And I think Kobe White really came in that game, gave them a boost. I think he had 19 points off the bench. It really was Alex Caruso and Kobe White, not Patrick Beverley. But the thing about it is that game was clearly getting out of control. And the Grizzlies, they weren't really calling. Taylor Jenkins was letting the guys play when he did call timeout. The same issues continued, and they carried over into the fourth quarter. And so it leads me to this. I'll say this. I think this game can be looked at as a one-offer because you have that first half picture to look at just like you have the second half picture, right? We've seen the Grizzlies struggle in fourth quarters this year. So I think that's more of the overlying issue if you want to break down how the Grizzlies can be at their peak in the playoffs. But the way the Grizzlies lost in this game, 31-3 in points off turnovers, that doesn't happen a lot to the Grizzlies. That's not something you can say, oh, yeah, that's a problem against a lot of teams. That was something the Chicago Bulls kind of got the Grizzlies rattled, and the Grizzlies start making uncharacteristic decisions that we haven't seen a lot. Just turnover after turnover after turnover. 31-3 advantage for Chicago in points off turnovers. That's the 28-point advantage, and the Bulls won by 21. So that tells you all you need to know right there. At the end of the day, the Grizzlies have their frantic, fast-playing style. It's great. It's great. I love to see it, and I think it takes a lot of teams off balance, and it works for the Grizzlies because we've talked about how they're not one of the great half-court teams. They get out so fast, and they score a lot of points. But you also have to be mindful when you're in those situations. Let's milk the shot clock a little bit in certain situations, especially if the other team has it going. Let's call a couple timeouts. Just get the ball to Jaren Jackson Jr., let him ISO on the block, because that's how the run was ended. The run to close the third quarter, I think, was 17-0. First possession of the fourth quarter, the Grizzlies did what they couldn't do in the third quarter because Jaren Jackson Jr. was in some foul trouble. They went to Jaren Jackson Jr. on the first possession, basket, run over. Just like that. You got to have a run stopper in the NBA. So not a big issue here. I think this is more of a one-offer, but it is something to be mindful of, again, with 1 week remaining into the postseason. Some other things to be mindful of 1 week remaining for the postseason are Morant, rotation, lineup combinations, and much more. We're going to talk about all that in a second. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you about Prize Picks. See, the thing about Prize Picks is it's different because what you do is you can pick a few players. You pick a few players, pick 2 to 6 players preferably. And you say, hey, I want this player to score this many points. I want this player to get this many rebounds. And I want this player to get this many assists. I want this player to get this many rebounds. And you can package it all together, right? You can pick 2 to 6 players is the number that Prize Picks gives you. Say, hey, they will score this many points. They'll score less than this. And guess what? You can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. Think about Prize Picks is you're not competing against other people. It's you versus the projections. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. So that's the NBA. That's the NFL when it's back. Major League Baseball is back. Shout out to my Atlanta Braves fans out there. NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, wherever. And entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that simple. Safe and fast withdrawals as well. And operational in over 30 states. Plus, you can go have Prize Picks in Canada. Well, how do you get Prize Picks? It's very simple, actually. Download the Prize Picks app, or you can go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. So remember, when we say you can receive up to $100 on an instant deposit match, it doesn't have to be $100. If you deposit $50, you'll get a deposit match of $50. You deposit some random number like $36.50, you'll get a deposit match of $36.50. But just make sure when you do that, don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On when you sign up for their instant deposit match. Coming up next, we're going to talk about how the Grizzlies are trying to aim and get that consistency after the break. So right now, we just mentioned, the lull there against the Chicago Bulls, and if it means anything, right? Because at the end of the day, there's a big sample size we've seen from the Grizzlies where they've had terrific play, and that game just was something we hadn't really seen. We hadn't seen the Grizzlies kind of just break down, in that way. And Taylor Jenkins kind of was speechless in a way after the game and trying to describe how did this happen, what happened, and how do you fix it. There are some other things here, and Taylor Jenkins has kind of touched on these a lot that I want to talk to you about when it comes to how the Grizzlies can find consistency. That's what they're doing right now. They're searching for consistency ahead of the playoffs. I actually wrote in the story of the commercial appeal that the Grizzlies actually aren't overly concerned with playoff seeding right now. And it's a different message from last year, right? If you remember last year, the Grizzlies were in the hunt with the Golden State Warriors, and the conversation was, oh yeah, can't wait to get the number 2 seed. We need the number 2 seed. We need the number 2 seed. It was we're pushing for it. We're pushing for the number 2 seed. This year, no one's saying that, at least not out loud in the public eye. It's more of we want to be playing our best basketball. And I think the Grizzlies have learned that from other teams in the Western Conference who've been there. Think Golden State last season, right? The Grizzlies played Golden State in March. Steph Curry didn't play. I think Klay Thompson didn't play, and a couple other, important role guys. While the Grizzlies were trying to, get everybody back, right? The Grizzlies were pretty much in pushing for playoff mode, and the Warriors got healthy. When the playoffs hit, they clicked and they won a championship. So right now, the biggest thing for the Grizzlies is consistency. So how do the Grizzlies find consistency? So 3 ways that I outlined here. And we'll start with the most interesting one, and then we'll work our way down. The most interesting one here is who gets the ball in certain situations. I know you're saying these guys have been playing together for years. I mean, that's not tough, right? Well, the dynamic of this team in the last month, in the month of March, I'll tell you this. I think the dynamic of this team changed as much as any month previously this season and possibly even last season. Let me explain why. For one, there's the obvious one. We'll throw the obvious answer out there. Luke Kennard, right? Luke Kennard has given this team an element of shooting that it didn't have at first, because now you can have Desmond Bane and Luke Kennard on the floor together, or at least one of them on the floor at all times when the game is competitive. So there's that angle, right? When you talk about, how the Grizzlies can find that consistency. And then there's Ja Morant being suspended. When Ja Morant was suspended, Jaren Jackson Jr. had his best stretch of play, period, this season. 25-point games. I think he had 4 or 5 games in a row, 25-plus points. And he looked dominant, two-way dominant, getting to the basket. He had 31 points against the Chicago Bulls on last night as well. He set the single-season blocks record. And the Grizzlies kind of discovered something. And I was talking to Taylor Jenkins about this a lot, and we've talked about it here, how the Grizzlies are kind of emphasizing getting the ball to Jaren Jackson Jr. But then there was Desmond Bane as well, another example, playing more of a ball handling role. So how does all that incorporate with Ja Morant? If you're watching Ja Morant right now, I know some of you are thinking it, some of you probably won't say it. I actually wrote about it this morning as well. You can go check it out on commercialappeal.com. I wrote about how Ja Morant kind of doesn't even view himself as a number 1 option anymore. That's strange, right? Ja Morant said to us after the second Clippers game that he basically is adjusting to, not being the number 1 option. And when he was talking about not being the number 1 option, he mentioned that, we have Dez, we have Ja. We have Dez, we have Jaren. And remember, when Ja Morant first got back, he offered to come off the bench. He suggested it. He said, hey, I can come off the bench. So I think there's a thing here. Ja Morant can't forget the guy who was doing the Call 12 celebration last season, the guy who was one of the top clutch scorers in the NBA. And I get it. Trust me, I'm just as familiar with his fourth quarter numbers this season as anyone out there. I've seen him shooting, 18% in the fourth quarter on 3-pointers, in these games. I've seen his field goal percentage numbers. I've seen all those numbers. But I raise you this. Throw those numbers out the window, because now the Grizzlies have a chance to close a game with a better offensive lineup than they had in any of those stretches. What we saw was teams packing the paint against John Morant and basically saying, you got to shoot it to beat us. Or you're not, or you're going to drive over 4 dudes. Good luck. They're going to stay attached to Desmond Bain, but they're not going to stay attached to everyone else. Well, guess what? Now you have the potential of saying, we got Desmond Bain on this side, we got Luke Kennard on this side. You stay attached to both of them. John Morant, easy pickings at the rim. Easy. Easy. So now you have a different dilemma where I say, hey, John Morant can attack the basket the same way he was attacking at the beginning of the season when he was struggling to score in the fourth quarter, and the results will be better simply because of what the Grizzlies have around them. But the thing is, you don't want Ja to forget that. Sure, I'm one of the people who said it. Jaren Jackson Jr., your fourth quarter, that's your go-to guy. But Ja needs to be a go-to guy too. You don't have to have one guy where you just give the ball in his hands and everybody moves out of the way every single possession late in the fourth quarter. The great teams, the greatest teams, tended to have a couple guys, in recent years, as basketball has reached a whole nother level where we're talking about just the level of talent on the floor. Look at all the great teams, right? You think of, the Warriors during their entire run, the Currys, the Clays, Andrew Wiggins, the Kevin Durant's of the world. The list goes on. All these teams have had multiple guys where they say, hey, you're my go-to guy, but we need that guy to step up as well. Ja and Jaren need to be there. But Ja has to remember who he is in those situations. I think, it'll come to him. Like I said, it's a continuity thing. It's Ja working his way back. And I know some people have said some things to me like, oh, Ja's holding the ball too long and all those things. That's kind of led to some turnovers as well. If you watch, my opinion on that is we see Ja holding the ball sometimes when he's trying to figure out what to do with it. And it's kind of led to some turnovers where when he's out of the game, sometimes the Grizzlies just they're moving the ball left, right, left, right, left, right. And everyone's getting touches. So it's a different dynamic. But Ja Morant is still finding his way. And again, I've said it a few times on this episode. I'm going to say it a couple more times before he ends up leaving. There's only a week left. So the urgency for these things is rapido. You need the Grizzlies to figure this out fast. Or we're talking about a fast exit in the playoffs with the way the Western Conference is looking. That's where we are at right now. So speaking of how great the Western Conference is looking, we're going to talk about that in a second. But before we get to that, I got to talk to you about Built Bar. The thing about Built Bar is, I love chocolate, right? I eat a lot of chocolate. But what stands out to me about Built Bar is the fact that it's healthy and it's 100% real chocolate. Well, the thing is, why is it like this? Well, you got protein. It's low in sugar and it's covered again in 100% real chocolate. So the thing about Built Bar is Locked On fans, you can win a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars of puffs delivered monthly straight to your door. All you have to do is go to built.com and when you vote for your favorite bar or puff, you will be entering a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners could get a free box of Built. So all you do is run to builtmarchmadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff. That's builtmarchmadness.com. Go vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop on and support built.com. But thank you for choosing Built Bar, because I'm going to choose Built Bar every time. And my co-host, my partner, Joe Molinax, who isn't here, we love us some Built Bar. We love us some Built Bar. And look, I'm telling you, Walmart, Sam's, they both have Built Bar. So you don't even have to go to the website to get it. You can just go right in your local Walmart. You can go to your local Sam's if you got a Sam's card, and Built Bar is right there for you as well. Coming up after the break, we're going to talk about the Western Conference layout right now. Where are the Grizzlies at, and are they comfortable? Stay tuned. So the Western Conference is tight. Western Conference is really tight. We've talked about this a lot, how each day the standings just drastically change. Drastically. It's something different. So the latest here is there was a lot of big movement on Sunday. For one, the first thing is the Grizzlies lost. When the Grizzlies lost, if you were like me, you looked down and you saw the Kings were playing the San Antonio Spurs, and you said, the Grizzlies are about to have a one-game lead, and the Kings have the tiebreaker, right? Yeah, the Kings have the tiebreaker. So about to have a one-game lead, 4 games to play, which means the Grizzlies, if they want that 2 seed, they're probably going to be forced to play some guys a little bit more in this last week than they probably want to. But then a stunner happened. The Kings lost in overtime to the Spurs. And with that being the case, the Grizzlies remain 2 games ahead of the Kings with 4 left to play. So a big development on that end for one. And then two, there's the rest of the Western Conference landscape, starting with the Nuggets. The Nuggets were at home against the Golden State Warriors. Again, coming into this day, it felt like there's a chance the Grizzlies can kind of just sneak their way up behind the Nuggets potentially for the 1 seed. I know the Nuggets have the tiebreaker there, but there was the opportunity to at least, shuffle some things up a little bit. But the Grizzlies, with that loss and the Nuggets win, the Nuggets haven't, quote unquote, clinched the number 1 seed. But let me tell you something. According to Damichael Cole, the Nuggets are going to be the 1 seed in the Western Conference. So with that being said, the Grizzlies are 3 games behind the Nuggets with 4 to play. Essentially, I believe the Nuggets' next win will clinch the number 1 seed. So basically, the Grizzlies will have to win out, and the Nuggets would have to lose out for any chance at the Grizzlies getting to number 1. Number 2 is a little bit interesting, right? Because the Grizzlies still have a 2-game lead with 4 to play over the Kings. But the thing is, the Kings have the tiebreaker. So some of you may look at it as a 2-game lead. I call it a 1-game lead. And, because you have 1 game is your margin for error. If the Grizzlies lose a game and the Kings win a game, that's your margin for error there. But what the Grizzlies have going for them is the Kings don't necessarily have an easy schedule in this last week. While we're talking about the Grizzlies going against the Blazers on Tuesday, the Kings will be on the road against a Pelicans team that has been winning lately. A Pelicans team that beat the Denver Nuggets, shorthanded Denver Nuggets by 20 points, and they beat the Los Angeles Clippers as well. So they play the Pelicans first, then they go to Dallas, another desperate team that's trying to get in. Then you get the Golden State Warriors, but the Warriors will be, another team that's fighting for playoff positioning. Then last game of the season is on the road at Denver. Again, I've said Denver should be clinched by then. So that game I do not expect to matter from Denver's standpoint. We'll see if there are any ramifications there with the Kings. So at the end of the day, next 3 games for the Kings are pretty tough. The Grizzlies have a chance to kind of create more space. And if they do that, there's a chance they could clinch before we get to those last couple games of the season where the Grizzlies will finish the last 3 games actually on the road. So who can the Grizzlies end up playing right now, right? 2 seed sounds like there's a really good chance that the Grizzlies will be at number 2 spot. Number 7 spot is where they'll play this team. And let me be clear here, because I put on Twitter one time the Grizzlies were the 2 and the Warriors were the 7, and I was like, the Grizzlies are on this point currently projected to play the Golden State Warriors, and people started to say, that the Warriors still have to win a play-in game. Well, duh, I know that. That's the point of saying they're projected, as in this team is the 7th seed and they're projected to be the 7th seed, so that means they're projected to play the Memphis Grizzlies. But with all that being said, right now the 7th seed is none other than the Los Angeles Lakers. Could you imagine that? We haven't thought about that one that much because the Lakers have, kind of been off in the wind a little bit, but now they've come storming back, and they're the number 7 seed right now. And again, it's bunched up. The Clippers are at 5, Golden State's at 6. The Lakers are at 7, the Pelicans at 8. What if I told you all 4 of those teams have the same exact record in the loss column? So But the Clippers and the Warriors are 41 wins. The Lakers and Pelicans are at 38 wins. So let's go to conference record, right? Because if you're looking at conference record between these teams, the Pelicans have the best conference record right now at 28-21. The Warriors are second at 27-22. The Clippers are 24-25, and the Lakers are 24-24. That could be a difference potentially. And who gets what? So those are the four teams right now where it's outlined as uh, very likely that the Grizzlies could end up playing one of those teams. And another interesting point, and we'll see, how teams figure it out. And I'm not gonna shut down the idea of this happening because it's the NBA. The Suns right now are the 4 seed. They've won 5 games in a row. Kevin Durant back. I think they're 5-0, 6-0, 6-0 with Kevin Durant in the lineup. And I've seen some people say, I've seen some Lakers fans say, stay on the 6 line so you don't have to, get to the 5 spot and eventually play, the Suns in the first round. Or the same thing with some Warriors fans wanting to play the Kings in the first round. I saw ESPN's Brian Windhorst actually reported that, Golden State and Lakers are among the teams that want to get their shot at the Kings, who would likely be the 3 seed in a 3-6 matchup. I don't really know, if I agree with the idea. It sounds good in theory, right? Kings not the playoff experience team, but that place is going to be rocking. Right now, I'm looking at it, I think you could make an argument for any of those teams, but I think there has been some room created there where it was all bunched up. Right now, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are separated by half a game, and then you got to go down to Minnesota at 9, where they're 2 games behind those teams in the loss column, and then Oklahoma City Thunder are 3 games behind those teams in the loss column. So some room being created. But the 4 teams that you have to outline now, if you're Grizzlies fans, the Clippers, the Warriors, the Lakers, the Pelicans. It could be either of those teams, but it's looking like very likely that a trip to LA in some shape or form, if you just do the odds, is possible, or a good old rematch with Golden State. And so we'll see and we'll monitor how that shakes out over the course of the week. Thank you for choosing Locked On Grizzlies for your first listen. Now for your second, make sure you make game to game your second listen on the Locked On Network. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game Locked On, and it's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Grizzlies is also available in all those places. And coming up tomorrow on Locked On Grizzlies, me and my co-host will be back together, Joe Mullinax. We'll be back, and we got a lot of things to talk about on the Grizzlies side. The Grizzlies are off on Monday, so there's no practice, no updates on that end. As far as Steven Adams goes, as soon as we hear anything, we will have you covered on Steven Adams because the MRI is this week. The 4-week reevaluation period was scheduled for this week, so we will have the update coming up soon there. But thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies, Locked On listeners. Make sure you continue to like, comment, subscribe, all those good things, and we appreciate you, and we'll see you again on Locked On Grizzlies.